Hi, I am Jennifer Purcell, and welcome to my podcast, Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will discuss, discover, and learn more about the challenges and triumphs of those with NLD and other learning challenges. I do have a website for this podcast, and it is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account for the podcast. They are all under the same name, which is Living with NLD. I also have a YouTube channel for the podcast, which can be found by Googling the title of the podcast, which is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. I would like to tell you about a nonprofit that I use for my research for this podcast. It is called the NVLD Project, and I use their blog for my research. They are a nonprofit that is based in New York and is trying to get NVLD back on the DSM, and they provide many resources for people with NVLD on their website. I'll provide you with the website for them in the podcast description. All proceeds from the ads on this podcast will be donated towards the NVLD project. Please feel free to explore the other topics on the podcast, and hopefully you will learn something new from them. I hope you enjoy today's episodes. I also want to mention to you that I just launched my podcast swag on Wednesday of this week and have a page for it on my website, and I will also send you the link to it in the podcast description, and I will also send it to you in the newsletter that I usually send out on Fridays. I am now selling t-shirts, water bottles, and a backpack, and they all have the podcast logo and title on it and the tagline. So I am looking forward to watching the sales and seeing who buys them, and spreading the word more about my podcast. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better, because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/ I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. Okay, so today's interview will be with Olivia. It is the fourth part of her interview, and she is from the East Coast. And also, I have started my 3 new podcasts. I start Shiro tomorrow. I started Chat Sparks and Growls, and I started Think Out already. So I hope you have caught those new episodes. If not, I will send them a link to them in the podcast description, and I will also send a link to them in the newsletter. All right, here's Olivia and Me.
The night light on my wall was showing different shadows, and I got scared. And I'm like, because like from the like whatever window or whatever showing different shadows. So I ended up so I'm looking at the further wall, and then my bed is against one wall. So I just turned my head and I slept to like the wall that was closest to my bed, looking at that for like till my family like moved. Till my family moved. So I think 8 years, 8.5 years. So there's to me no way I can explain other than how I sleep, or like that I had to sleep with the nightlight or this, or like, that kind of thing, other than that thing. And so it's great when you say that, it makes me happy, because it's like people really don't think we can remember that far back, but no, we actually can remember
Right.
that far back.
Yeah, I can totally get how you're feeling because for some reason I can't sleep with the nightlight on. It has to be dark for
Yeah.
me. Maybe because of my migraines or something else, but I can relate to the memory piece because it's like for me that is the earliest memory I have, and it's weird when that happens.
Yeah. And
But
it
I
also,
was
I don't know for you, sorry, but I don't
okay.
know, for me, it's like the kind of thing of like the nightlight. It went to a nightlight to like the closet light. And for years I had to sleep with the closet light. But now, like a couple of years ago, I was just like, I'm an adult. What am I like that could like not because I'm an adult, but I'm like, I really don't need like this light on. So I like shut it off, and I've been sleeping like in the dark since. But it's funny how for you grew up, you always had it at it dark. And I'm like, it just shows the difference is what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's
No,
like,
that's okay.
yeah, it's
Um, I was just gonna ask you, going back to NLD, and this is kind of can relate to how you feel about it. Do you, with talking about the world, we've talked about the world. Do you ever wish that there was something that they knew about NLD so that they would understand it more?
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's also like a goal in my life, that if I'm a singer songwriter and I have this platform. So I've been kind of debating about that, of like, how much do I want NVLD to be in this platform of this public figure of the singer songwriter?
Hmm.
Because you hear about sob stories all the time on talent shows, like, and then the talent TV shows, like The Voice, the American Idol, they're called the sad stories when you in interaction, and some person has to have something. And I didn't want to make NVLD. I'm not saying I would ever go on the shows, because I have some different thing. I'm not saying I'm against those shows, but there's a reason why I went in, but that's a different story. My whole thing is, if I did go, I mean, I wouldn't want to say I had NVLD, because I don't want that put that in that sob story category. I don't want
Hmm.
people to be like, oh, she's the NVLD girl. I want to bring it into a world where people don't see it as, oh, she's the NVLD girl, but oh, she's, oh, this is Olivia, this is what she does, and this is this and this. Oh, and she also has NVLD. NVLD is this and this and this, because NVLD is not just me. It's not just one person. NVLD is, it may be highly undiagnosed. It may be, in a sense, I think I've read on the NVLD project, only 3% of the population have it, or something like that.
Right.
And that's still very rare, and like that kind of thing. I mean, to me now, it seems like so, not a lot, like so many, but like a lot more people than I ever knew have it. But
Hmm.
it's the thing of, yeah, I think I would love some way to bring it to the attention to the world of, I think it does need to be out there, and it needs to be brought out in the right way. It doesn't need to be like, if there's going to be a kid that, like, for instance, I'll give a quick example. I watched the show called Degrassi when I was younger,
Hmm.
and they had a character on that show that had dyslexia, but for the whole entire episode, or the dyscalculia, I think that dyscalculia,
Hmm.
for the whole entire episode, her friend thought the tutor was or not this math teacher who was tutoring her after school was making a move on her and kind of like that. So it was so focused on that. It wasn't focused, and like literally in the last 2 minutes of it, she goes, "Oh, I have dyscalculia. That's why. That's why." He was comforting me. He put his arm on my shoulder because he was comforting me. He
Aw.
was in that move, blah, blah. And I realized later, because I saw that episode again, I was like, oh my God, as a kid, all I thought about was the guy making a move on her. I didn't really think of what dyscalculia was, or like dyslexia was. And I'm like, and they didn't mention that afterwards. I think she had it for like one episode and they didn't really bring it up. So if it's going to be brought up in the world, it's got to be brought up where people who don't have it will understand it in a way. They're not looking through one lens, but they're looking through a lens that shows many, like, of what NVLD can be instead of just like one single thing.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I, you know, trying to think of other people that I know who have NLD. I've never met somebody in person who has
Same.
NLD, but I have met people virtually through the podcast, so that
Mhm.
kind of counts.
Yeah.
And like through the interviews. And I've heard of Chris Rock, the comedian.
Mhm.
He was diagnosed later in his life with NLD, and when that happened, it was like, oh, for me, like I had the podcast then, and I was like, I really would like to interview him on the podcast, but I know that's a big thing that might not happen.
Right. And
Because
can I tell you maybe why? And because I'm right there with you with him, because I'm like, oh, great. At first, I was like, he can like bring it out there in the forefront, but then what's it to him? Why is it
right.
his responsibility? It's when he feels comfortable. He just found out about it too. I think so too. So it's not his responsibility to be like, oh, now I have this. I'm gonna make it well known. It's on his own time and then it's on his own terms. And so I agree with you, because it would be awesome to do something with them or to speak with them or like even like talk to him about it. And I agree with you. It would be awesome for him to be on your show and everything like that, because he seems like an awesome guy. But yeah, I totally understand of that way of like, because I think a lot, and I think when it becomes in the forefront in the world, we put celebrities of anything, of whatever they have, like on a pedestal. For
Mhm.
instance, Nick Jonas had diabetes, and or the I think type 1 diabetes or something. And
Yeah.
it became such a like, oh, so he's gonna represent. He wanted to. I'm not saying Chris Rock doesn't want to represent, but he realized Nick Jonas with diabetes, he had a platform and he had a message. And it's to each their own, with everybody. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that's like what pops in my head whenever I think of Chris Rock. Cause I was like you, when I read it, I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. And then it was like, there was no big headline on like e-news or something like that, entertainment or thing. It was like smaller, like not saying smaller journalism, like articles or about, not smaller, that's the wrong word. It wasn't like forefront on TV or like that,
Right.
or like, spread around on social media. It was more so like, oh, this is what he has. And then gossip came about somebody else the next time.
Yeah, I agree. And um, like you were saying, it it's not that he's going to be you know, the representative of it, but it would just be cool for me. I thought it was interesting because it's like, well, if they see a celebrity have it, then they'll know it's a real thing.
Exactly. 100% agree with you on that.
That
That's
we're not making it up.
right, right, exactly. That I agree with you on. That would be awesome. I mean, have you reached out to his like team or anything or that, or you're still thinking about it? Which if you're still thinking about doing that, oh, trust me, there are things where I want to do with people that where I'm like, I will wait to do it, because if I don't feel like right now jump into it, I mean, it's better to like ease into it than always jump right in. Don't,
Well,
yeah.
to answer your question, because I've done this with an author who has NLD, I communicated to the author and probably to somebody on Christmas Rock's team, I don't know who, but that I have NLD and that I have a podcast about it, because it's like, well, in that way I can relate to you
Mhm.
and I can empathize with you in some way. But you know, neither of them have responded. But what was, I don't know if this was because of Chris Rock or not, but I remember after I sent it to him on it was some social media platform I sent it to
Yeah,
him on.
yeah.
Um, I looked on my website for the podcast and I could see that somebody that lives in the state that Chris Rock lives in went onto the website. I was like, was that him?
So I was like, is that him? Maybe it's him. Well, if he's listening now, hi, Chris.
Yeah, that
You
would be
never know.
cool. I mean,
That would be cool. Yeah.
because you know, you don't see who it is because of the privacy piece, but
Right.
stuff like that. But
Yeah.
it's just cool to imagine that.
Maybe
But
it is. You never know. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think I know the answer to this next question already, but I usually ask it. Do you ever wish you didn't have NLD?
When I was a teenager, yeah. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there were definitely times when I was a teenager. I think that would probably have been in, like, the depression stage or something like that. It was definitely, like, um, there were definitely I mean, even with, like, family moments too, there was, like, not just school, but, like, certain things with my family, and it would be like that, but I it it I don't wish it now because I obviously, like, is I wanna say, like, I guess, like, fully accept it, but see, accepting is the wrong word. It's not the again, it's I wanna find that right word. It's not that I love it. It's not that I hate it. It's not that I accept
You're
it.
okay with it.
Right, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, there were I mean, I'm trying to think if there is any time or ever didn't wish I had NVLD, but the thing about that, and I'll put that in this like the little example is this that there are definitely things like in high school or middle school where I couldn't stop thinking about like my past in that way of
Mm-hmm.
like I can't believe this happened or accident. Was it beginning of junior year? Yes, I got in a car accident and my car actually flipped over. It was the kind of yeah, it was the kind of thing where long story short, I thought somebody was following me and because they were
Mm-hmm.
telling their lights and they were flashing their brights. She thought I cut her off and I didn't see her when she came in, so it's kind of like if you could see like she's coming in this way and I came in this way and that's how that happened. Like she came right behind me and I didn't see her. I didn't see her till she flashed her brights at me. So I and my friends and I, it's a different story, but we were kind of followed by a car. It's such a random thing after homecoming that year. And it
Mm-hmm.
was such like so now you think about it, I'm now a 16 going on 17-year-old, like in junior year, or wait, yeah, junior year, like that. And she's not this. So I'm freaking out. Oh my God, is she gonna like follow? And here's where NVLD comes in. You have, your visual spatial awareness and stuff. So you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
focus and you have that going on behind you. And I turn left and I go, okay, if I turn left and she goes straight, I don't know what teenage mind was think my teenage why my teenage mind was thinking this, but I'm like, I'll be okay. No, she followed me. So here I am now freaking out and I hit a curb because I don't not paying attention to that. Hit a curb, flip over, anything like that. Came out with a broken thumb, bruises, and back spasms that turned out to be later on. But like all of that, I was just like, oh gosh, here's another thing that happened in my life. And it's like kind of a heavy burden, I guess you could say. And now I have to deal with going through that trauma and living through that and da, da, da. So I'm like, man, I wish, and there are times, so many times, like where I will say this, where I wanted to like leave my school, go somewhere else. I wanted to like run away because on top of MVLD, there's other stuff going on. And, I was depressed at certain points as well. And I remember After I switched to a group of friends, after like fully accepted my NVLD and told my friends about my NVLD and seeing the warmth and the acceptance from them sort of kind of made me feel like it was an easier way to move on and not, ever hate NVLD or hate things that are going on, carry that burden that I had with me with certain other things that happened with my life as well. And then this car accident happens. And so I'm back at
For
this.
one.
Right. I'm like, "Oh, god, that." And my friend's driving me because I don't wanna drive. I was too afraid to drive now. I ended up 10 months later driving, different story, but, I said to her in the car, because it was like that, I was like, "Hey, do you ever wish you could go back in time and, like, change, like, things?" And I was like, change stuff that's happened and just like if you knew it was gonna happen, you would change it. So when it happened or just like that kind of thing, like if
Mhm.
you could go back in time, would you change anything? And I kid you not, I think we went like 30 seconds or so. It felt like a minute or whatever, but like with silence because she was thinking. She was just thinking and thinking. She goes, you know what? No, because everything that happened in my past led to where I am now and who I am now and who I am and where I am is happy. I'm happy. I'm very happy. And I want to change anything like that happened, even the bad stuff, because that led to here. And I went, oh, you're right. I am happy because I was happy. I
Mhm.
was happy most of the time. I just had certain things that would pop up here and here. And I went, oh, you're right, and that made me see to, like, never really hate NVLD and think that, yes, it could be a burden, and it goes in that retrospect. We all have our own issues with NVLD, we all have our own issues with just other things in life itself, and I'll leave that question with the final note I say is that my therapist once told me, or I say psychologist, I don't want to call her therapist, she's a psychologist. There's 2 different things, I'm sorry.
It's
She
okay.
told me, that and this is why I wanna just bring it out for everybody to hear. When you look too much into the past, it leads to depression. When you look too much into the future, it leads into anxiety. Find your middle ground. So ever since my friend and also hearing that, it's very true of that. You just gotta live in the present. Like my dad would say too, day by day. You just gotta take it day by day. And that's something with NVLD. We have something that whether we were born with it or wherever we were diagnosed with it in time, it's something where like it does make us question. I think you could like that of like because I've heard you say, "Oh, okay, well that's the reason why that happened with you," and it's like that, but it's a way to like finally be like, oh, "Okay, we get it now," and then it's the time to move on, move here, and also not think of like what's gonna happen. Because I've had that thing where I'm a big overthinker, and whether that's MVLD or just my personality, who knows? But it's the kind of thing where, yeah, I there were so many times where I hate it. I wish I never had it. But there's also so many times where I loved it. I'm so happy I've had it. I mean, it got me out of detention once. And not kidding, I could say that story is a funny story. I have to tell that. 8th grade, I got called into the principal's office because my t-shirt was too tight. Apparently, I had a and the principal was a man principal. There was a woman in there as well. I forgot who she was, like in relation. I don't think she was a teacher or she was working in the office, but she was just there because I guess, it was good to have a woman in there while there's also a male in there. And this topic, which was I had a t-shirt that said like something about best friends and hugs. So when they brought it up to me, I thought that's what they were talking about. That was the inappropriateness or whatever.
Mhm.
And I was just like, well, I wore it first semester and you guys didn't say anything about that first semester. And what's wrong with hugs? I've seen people wear much worse. There's no like sexual endo. It wasn't like anything like that. It was like best friends are the best hugs, kind of thing, which
Mhm.
is not any like inappropriate at all. And he's like, no, well, we're just thinking it's like, a little tight. And I was like, are you calling me fat? I kid you not, the principal's face like went white, was just like, no, 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 no. I'm not calling it that. I'm saying it's tight in certain areas. And I'm like, also, I would like to relate this that yes, it's still going on in our schools today with women, but this was also early 2000s. And and so the principal was like, no, 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 I swear I'm not calling you fat. Cause I'm like, well, I wore this again. I wore this first semester and you didn't say anything. So you're saying it's too tiny. Then all I'm thinking is you're calling me fat. And he's like, no, I'm not calling you fat. And he's just like, go to lunch. Just go to lunch. And I was like, wait, so am I in trouble? He's like, no, you're not in trouble. Go to lunch. My friends. I saw my friends in the hall as we were going, some girls in the hall. Oh my God, I'm laughing at this. Because my friends go, Olivia, he was not calling you fat because I told them they're like, are you okay? I was like, I think so. I don't know what happened. That's what I told them. And then I told them what happened. And they all started laughing and they go, Olivia. He said, Olivia, he was not calling you fat. He was talking about your boobs. I'm like, my boobs. I was like, sorry, I know I told him that he was like, they're like, my friend goes, they grew over the summer. They, whatever, puberty, they were talking about this. And I was just like, I was still so confused. And one of them goes, no, look at that girl. Cause there was another girl in the class. Like her and I were the ones that were first out of anybody, probably my grade. They were going through puberty pretty fast. They were like, look at her. And I looked at her, I was like, oh, I get it now. And I was just like, oh, amazing. I got out of detention for that. Like, so in a way, like, yeah, there are times where, yes, I have hated having it or wish I didn't have it, but there are times where I absolutely loved having it because it made me see things or like even if I like didn't see it at the time, I saw it later. And then like, I mean, in a way, that's what started my rebellious stage all through probably then till high school because I became a really rebellious kid. But I was just like, nothing. I thought I could get away with it. But when you're that young, you think, oh. And then I'm like, oh, well, if I didn't get like, I would come to school after that with tank tops on that were spaghetti tank tops, but I had a jean jacket over it. Oh God, I can't believe I'm even saying this. And I would like in classes have the jean jacket over. I thought it was so cool. I don't know why. And rebellious. And I would have it over my shoulders during classroom where the teachers, but in the hall, I would take it off my shoulders, just be that rebellious. And I mean, that to me, yes, it started maybe with NVLD, but that just to me was just then the little personality kicked in of like the rebelliousness. Sorry, I just
No,
love
that makes sense.
that story is just so funny to me because I still to this day I feel for that principal when I'm like, "Are you calling me fat?" I'm like, "Oh my God, I see a lawsuit coming." I think that's what it was in his mind when I kept being like, "You're calling me fat." And yeah, so yeah. So yeah, to answer your question, that's all to answer your question.
Um,
I'm just laughing.
it's okay. I'll let you finish laughing.
Oh, good. I'm good now. Sorry.
It's okay. I get it. Sometimes I
I'm in
start
a
laughing and then I just start laughing at myself.
yeah.
Um, so just like a couple more questions, but do you have anything you would tell others who think they might have MLD, but they're not sure as like motivation to go find out?
I
Or when they get
I
discouraged?
what? Oh, sorry.
Or I was gonna say, or when they get discouraged, like they're like,
Yeah,
why is this happening?
I want to say, I think you asked me that question before we met too, and I wrote down my answer, but so I don't know if I'll say the same answer.
It's okay.
Yeah. So to anybody who either just found out or they think they may have it, like I first off, for those who think they may have it, but they're not unsure, definitely go get tested. And like
Mhm.
there's, I mean, whether you're in school or I mean, I'm pretty sure if you're out of school, if you're an adult, there's ways to get tested. I wish I knew, but I don't know. But I mean, Google anything like that and look it up or ask people around that you trust.
Yeah.
And because that is the best way. Because if you don't have MVLD, then maybe you have something else. And that's
Right.
like a great way to yeah, to like um to know, and it's better to know than to keep questioning it or to put it
Mhm.
if there's anything I've learned, not just with having NVLD, but with ever anything I've ever questioned or like that, it's better to know than to wait. And with anybody, so then with anybody who just found out or they have it, and my advice to you is that if you're in school, like um in a way, like now you have the NVLD project. I know there was uh, I don't know if it's you, it could be somebody else, but I think there is somebody on Instagram that has like a teen NVLD account. Is that you
Mhm.
or is it somebody else? It's like they I've seen it where they be like there's a teen discussion, like for like a Zoom meeting where like for teens or whatever, like if they all have it so they could all talk to each other. I don't know. I there's a account like I've seen that come up on my Instagram. There's just I mean, in a way, like yeah, I would say school sucks. There's no
Mhm.
doubt about it. I'm just gonna flat out say school sucks for a bunch of people too without NVLD. And it does suck to have an NVLD. It sucks to have any learning disability, anything like that. But it also can not suck in a ways of just figuring out like if I, for instance, didn't I could have easily in high school. And I'm gonna answer this question and kind of relating to like me again and like what I go through. So I hope the people listening could kind of take away from this and maybe I'll find like a good way to explain what I'm trying to explain right now. But I in high school, there was easiest thing of I could not I could have cared less about school. I could have cared less about a lot of things because I found out MVLD and I didn't get certain things. There's certain concepts I didn't get right away. There's certain symptoms of mine that like affected here and there. And I mean, if anybody, I could have stayed with that group of friends because I just wanted to stay with that group of friends and feel like I was accepted with them and popular with them or whatever, with them. But I realized in a way it wasn't good for me and
Mhm.
me in general. And whether, I mean, I could say that as my mental health or just like my thinking as well. That's why I switched a group of friends. I mean, I could say this, my LRC teacher, the first day of my high school, she was new and I was new too. And I thought easy way to get by because I didn't want to I felt stupid. I freshman year felt as dumb as they come. And now I knew the answer to it because I knew NVLD. And I thought, oh, if I couldn't answer a question, I wouldn't answer the question. That's why I waited for a tutor. And
Mhm.
that's why too with like math, for instance, algebra, a teacher of mine um told me about math lab and how I could get help with that. So I would go there and I would with him, not him, but whoever's in that math lab at the time, I started understanding math a lot more too, because here's my tutor, but then here's also somebody else helping me during my free time.
Mhm.
And it was started to turn my attitude and the way I looked at NVLD and school and life in general of, well, I can't do this too. Hey, maybe I can. And then by sophomore year, end of sophomore year, junior year, I realized, oh, I can do the schoolwork, even if it's hard. Like I started answering things that were like the analytical questions I told you about, like in the beginning, that 12-sheet worksheet. If I got that junior year, I would have been able to answer those questions like that
Mhm.
because I started getting and learning and gaining the skills and the resources that were necessary of how to learn. I was just doing it probably differently than my peers. I was doing it with the help of my speech teacher, my LRC teacher, my other teachers, my parents, my tutors. And I was doing it because I found a way of it clicked in my brain. Now, in college, I went to college and in a way that was different. I got test anxiety in college. I never had test anxiety before that. And in that answer, I saw NVLD and my issues with school as like a brick wall. And there it
Mhm.
was like, I always saw it as an invisible wall growing up. And that invisible shattered when I found out about NVLD. Then it became NVLD kind of became in my life in general, it became like all these it became a bridge I had to cross. And that bridge I had to cross with kind of telling people out loud, saying it out loud. Cause I didn't really say it out loud unless that one time. And like, I don't even think I said it with my parents actually. So I crossed that bridge, and now in college became like this brick wall. And now, because it was the reason why it was a brick wall was, okay, I went through all these things I went through with NVLD, with school, with my friends, with how to act in social situations, how to answer these questions, how to deal with this, or how to detect.
I also want to mention to you that I just launched my podcast swag on Wednesday of this week and have a page for it on my website, and I will also send you the link to it in the podcast description, and I will also send it to you in the newsletter that I usually send out on Fridays. I am now selling t-shirts, water bottles, and a backpack, and they all have the podcast logo and title on it and the tagline. So I am looking forward to watching the sales and seeing who buys them, and spreading the word more about my podcast. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better, because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist. So you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/. I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. As I wrap up, there are some things I would like to share with you. I do have a website for this podcast. It is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page for this podcast. It is called Living with NLD. I will include the links for those in the description. In conclusion, I would like to hear from my audience. If you know individuals with NLD that I could interview for this podcast, please email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com. What are you interested in learning about NLD? I know I'm not an expert, but I do know I have the living experience of having it. I would like you to practice journaling about your gifts and differences. Also see if there is a way that you can make that difference become easier for you to do than it originally was. Thank you for listening today, and please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to it. Thank you. Bye.